I don't like watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians, but the students do, right? Like, and being able to connect with them on their level, helps. Like, I have TikTok. I don't know how to post a TikTok, but I'll watch TikToks. I'll see the trends. And then I could interact with students, and when they're like, "Oh, did you see that trend? Yeah, I saw that trend." Like, that's pretty funny. Like, or being able, when they're not expecting it, to say like, "Oh, well, what about this?" And they're like, "You know about that?"
Hey everybody, this is Jeremy Tiers from Tutor Collegiate Strategies, and you're about to check out the latest episode of the Mission of Mission podcast, a show that's designed to help higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and managers. Each week I'll introduce you to an industry leader or difference maker who will share helpful advice, tips, and strategies that will help you grow professionally and personally. Mission of Mission is part of the Enrollify podcast network. I'm excited to share my latest candid conversation, so let's get started. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tiers, and this is episode 24 of the Mission Admissions podcast. I'm really excited for my next guest who can speak to a lot of different things that have come up in my conversations lately, including work-life balance when you're the parent of a young child, and the interplay between using a sales approach and a personal connection approach in admissions recruitment. I've known Brian Switay for more than 8 years now. And Brian, I don't even know if I've ever shared this with you, but you were one of the first people back when I started my email newsletter community in 2014 to actually reach out to me for advice, which is kind of cool. I had to go back and look and I noticed that. But since that time, we've gotten to know each other very well. And I've really watched you grow as a higher ed professional and leader. You've gotten married, you've become a dad, and so we have all kinds of stuff to talk about. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Jeremy, thank you so much for the introduction and having me on. I appreciate it.
So I'd love to start with this whole concept and idea of work-life balance, Brian, because it comes up a lot. I know you and I have actually talked about it a handful of times over the years as well in our conversations. When you started your career in higher ed, right, you were in your early to mid 20s, you were single. What did work-life balance mean to you then? And just, was there any concept of, okay, like I have to have this balance, or was it like just go, 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 and I'll take breaks when I need to take breaks?
Yeah, I think it was that kind of mentality, right? Like, starting out and working in student affairs, really, for working on my master's as a graduate student. I didn't really have this work-life balance. It was work, and then when you're done with work, it was whatever you need to take care of. And then getting, my first real job after graduating, it was answering emails at 2 o'clock in the morning and kind of staying up and working diligently to make sure that you're hitting these goals. And you burn out real quick. I remember at one point getting really, really sick and like just kind of out of it and not knowing what I was doing and just why am I in this robotic zone of answering emails at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And students would email you and it would almost be like a text conversation. And it got really bad to a point where I needed to just stop and like look at things and be like, this is not going to be sustainable for the long term. And in looking at that and where I was in a new relationship at that point, and having conversations with her, who eventually became my wife, smarter than ever, and kind of understanding that, she was like, what are we doing here? Like, why are you jumping out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning to answer these emails? Why not wait a couple hours? Think about it for a little bit longer. And like that insight completely changed how I thought about things and kind of started that process of being able to just disconnect from the work and focus on other things. We work a lot in higher ed and answering these emails and working with students who have never been through this process before. And catering to them is part of the job, but it's also a part where we have to realize this is an email conversation or this is a thread that can be, answered first thing in the morning. It doesn't have to be answered 7, 8 o'clock at night, compared to an immediate conversation that needs to be answered from a VP or your boss or something like that, right? So being able to identify and differentiate some of those things, I think has started to put me on that right path, but also being able to take time and reflect. Like there's been times I've driven home completely with, in the silence of my own car. You do a lot of talking during the day and you just want to sit in your thoughts.
How much do you think when you first started then, and I appreciate you sharing all of that, was it never really was laid out to me. Like, you don't have to answer emails at 2 in the morning, or like, and so you just did what you thought you were supposed to do
Yeah.
because, again, you wanted to be giving it your all, being as attentive as you could to those needs. So was it more looking back, that idea of I just didn't know any different, so I thought this is what I was supposed to do? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, probably definitely in that thought process of like, I want to be a good team player for this institution, company that I was working at, right? And how do I show them that I'm a valuable member of this team by going that extra mile? There's no complaints from students or people I was working with. Brian's attentive. He answers his emails. He's easy to talk to, and the response is quick. It was something that we need. So I always thought with that approach of like, well, if there's no negatives on the other side, right? And they're super happy with the work I'm giving, then my supervisor team will be happy with that approach. Come to find out that it wasn't necessarily always that, because, if you're answering emails all night, you're in those morning meetings drained. So you're kind of, robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, right? So you look like you're doing more work on the back end and being this true team player, but you're also kind of skimping out on some of the meetings or valuable input in those meetings that you need to put in. I know everyone kind of uses like work-life balance, but it's even like work balance and then work-life balance on top of it too, right? So how do you balance those components together in being a good boss or being a good worker? And I kind of think back to like watching like my parents work and seeing like their work ethic and how much they put into it. And it was completely different. My dad was a laborer and did work and like wasn't necessarily always on the emails. And to this day, he thinks like remote days are a vacation day. He doesn't understand that concept. Like if you weren't at the plant, like you didn't work. Like trying to break those generational barriers as well, and trying to explain like, hey, this is, goes way deeper than just responding to an email. I want to show the people who hire me or who I work for that I'm a good worker and I work the nth degree, but also knowing that the nth degree also has to be in the office as well, not after hours too.
And I think you hit on something really important, which is it's not only obviously lived experiences. You don't know what you don't know until you're into it. And then you realize, to your point, gosh, I answer all these emails, which is great. Or I'm really attentive to students' needs after hours, but then I'm exhausted, for example, in staff meetings.
Yeah.
I think it's the lived experience, but it's also, to your point, you mentioned having conversations with your then girlfriend, now wife, Courtney. And I'm sure you also talked with other people in the industry that you met. I think it's learning, wait, okay, they're not doing it like that. Maybe I don't have to do it like this. Maybe I can still accomplish everything I want to accomplish and not be so exhausted in those morning meetings or when it gets to the afternoon because I was up, late again doing that. So let's transition then and fast forward because you mentioned it. You eventually got married to your girlfriend, now your wife, Courtney, and you eventually became a dad. You now have a son, Sawyer, who's almost 2. So help me understand the last even 2 to 4 years, Brian. How has the work-life balance changed? Because I would argue you haven't taken a step back in your higher ed roles. In fact, you've moved up the leadership ladder, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. But like, help me understand with all of this lived experience, all of these conversations, and now being a parent and a husband, how has it changed for you work-life balance wise?
Yeah. I mean, just thinking about it, and you have a daughter as well too. Like they tell you like, there's no book or a guideline that you could follow. Like there's thousands of books on how to be a parent, but there's not a guideline or what everybody could follow. It's not a cookie cutter type thing. So that lived experience and kind of making those mistakes and working through that process really comes down to communication. Court and I have a really strong communication level in terms of, Sunday night, let's figure out the week. What are we doing? Everything down granular. What are we doing for dinner on Wednesday, even though it's Sunday? Trying to get everything in line. And her as a teacher and having events, the recruitment months, September, October, when she has back to school nights and parent teacher conferences. And then again in February, March, those are tough months when, you're in the office all day and then you have a college fair at night. How do you balance those out and trying to move those things? And now even with having virtual events where you are home, but you're still working, for an information session. So really, it really comes down to a lot of communication. I'll do this, she'll do this, and we kind of have it squared away.
Alrighty, we're gonna play a game, guys, okay? So, first and foremost, get a pen, get a paper, pull out your notes app on your phone, whatever it might be, okay? Got it? Great. All right, what keywords does your website currently rank for? Take a couple seconds, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. I gave you a few, not just a couple. What doesn't it rank for that you think it should rank for? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, what are a few keyword opportunities that you could be winning on if you just simply tweaked some of your existing website copy? Got it? Okay, how'd you do? Ooh, not so hot. Not sure what you're currently ranking for, or not sure what you could be ranking for. Well, that's okay, because our friends at DD Agency want to help you answer all of these questions. DD Agency is a higher ed specific marketing technology agency that has conducted countless SEO audits for colleges and universities across the country. In these audits, they detail where you currently rank, what you could be ranking for, exactly how copy should be tweaked on website pages, and so much more. If this sounds like something that you could benefit from, give the guys at DD Agency a ping and be sure to mention that Enrollify sent you to claim a 10% discount on any of their SEO offerings. So head on over to enrollify.org/DDA SEO. That's DDA as in DD Agency, SEO, or simply follow the link in the show notes below. That will guarantee you get a 10% discount off of your audit. All right, head on over to enrollify.org/DDA SEO, or simply Google DD Agency, find DD Agency's website, and be sure to mention that you heard about them through Enrollify when you request your audit. All right, folks, back to the show.
Does Courtney call you on your crap when you don't do what you say you're going to do?
Let's just say my honey-do list is still very long. Yes, she does. But in looking at everything, when we first had Sawyer, we had a grid, like a weekly grid of, we called it the menu. Like, here's what we got. This is what's happening this week. And it had everything: breakfast, lunch, dinner, who had a night event, who had this. And it was very organized. And it worked, and then it didn't work when everything got convoluted. When everybody's back at work, we're not on maternity or paternity leave anymore. That's when things changed a little bit, and we had to sit back down and be like, this isn't working. Let's figure this out. Why? That's the challenging part, right? And I think without being able to sit and talk with her daily, weekly, monthly, what have you, everything from budgeting for your allotted expenses to just, hey, Tuesday night I have an event. Do you have an event that night? Like, let's figure this out. Or if someone's sick in the family, I'm grateful that my parents watch my son while we work, instead of having to put him into daycare. But when they get sick, like, what's the backup? Who can we call? Or what's, do I have to take off? Do you have to take off? What's the situation look like? So it's a lot of juggling, but in terms of being able to communicate, that line has to stay open between me and her. And if it doesn't, then we're in a rough spot. But luckily, we haven't had any of those, and the communication is strong. But that's the biggest piece of being able to, me and her sit down and plan out the week, but then also being able to not totally bring home work, and not revolve the conversation around work too.
I always go back when people ask me about work-life balance to this: are you happy? Right? Because the work-life balance of somebody with a teenage daughter like me is going to be the same, but yet I would argue a little different than you with a 2-year-old. And it's going to be different than somebody else who just started their higher ed career this year and is in their early 20s like you were when you started out. And so to me, I don't think there is an ideal work-life balance. I just, at the end of the day, to your point, are you feeling burnt out all the time? Are you feeling miserable? Or are you happy because you have a balance that works for you? What do you do then in a typical day? Because you've now been in higher ed for what, 8, 9, almost years. What does a typical day look like, Brian, in terms of, all right, you're managing a lot of different things. How are you prioritizing? Tips, tricks, anything you found that works well for you?
Man, that's a good question. A decade in, I think I'm still feeling like I've only been here for a cup of coffee. Like, it feels weird, right? Like, I feel like I've been tasked with so many more responsibilities, but also at the same time feel like I'm still learning things that I shouldn't be having these responsibilities. Like, this weird feeling that you can experience. In terms of like prioritizing, like I always try to chat, like, my day will start with the idea of like, whatever I'm entering into the work day with, if I could clear out my inbox, and not clear out where there's no emails in your inbox, but clear out any emails that haven't been answered to. That's like first goal for me, right? That's the challenge of the day. If I could complete that, then my goal, similar to, if you have your iWatch and you get your circles completed, like that's my circle task for the day. And then as the day progresses, like what challenges come up? Does my immediate supervisor need a report completed by the end of the day? Does a certain timed event need to be completed? Is there a report that needs to be done that I could work on? Is there decisions that have to be rendered and reviewed that I can get released? So as the day progresses, different challenges unfold, and I try to prioritize them in real time. There's probably not an answer to the question that you're looking at, because it changes daily. I feel like the tasks and the challenges that come are never the same thing every day, and it could be, right? But I think that's what I kind of really love about this industry of higher ed. When I first started, it was, you recruit and you're traveling, and you're road running, and you're going to all these fairs and high school visits. And then just when you hit that peak of like, I don't want to go to another college fair, it changes. And now you're sitting and you're reading applications and so on and so on. And so many people listening right now agree with and can relate to that. I think as you move up the chain, you realize that, hey, I'm not going to as many college fairs, but the things that you're doing day in and day out in the office are those similar kind of traits, right? So reading applications, still kind of shaping the class, doing that stuff, but then transitioning to, all right, we got to do some management stuff. So let's do performance evaluations, or let's review concur reports so that people could get reimbursed for their travel. So it's always like this cyclical balance of, just when you're getting to this point, something new will come up. And that's over the course of the year. But in terms of the day, it's always something like that. And I think that's what I really love about this industry.
And so you started your career like a lot of people do on the undergraduate, traditional student recruitment side. You did that for 6 years, kind of combination, right? As a counselor and assistant director, you were at Stevens Institute of Technology there, and then you pivoted to the transfer world at TCNJ, as you said, where you are now. Just curious of a couple of things related to that. Number one, why'd you make that pivot? And then number two, obvious differences in terms of how the transfer world is different than the undergraduate world.
Yeah, I think I was just ready for a new challenge. I've had multiple conversations with supervisors when I was at Stevens, and it just felt that, we weren't on the same level of connection. The range and growth for me kind of capped at a ceiling level, and there was just no more ability for me to grow in that position. And I was involved with NJACAC, and I, shout out to my buddy Russ at Binghamton, and he's bounced around. If you know Russ, you know Russ. Me and him worked on the bus tour with NJACAC, and I was luckily able to meet with Gracia while we visited TCNJ, and the conversation just kind of spurred from there. And eventually applied for the position here at TCNJ, and luckily, was offered it. But the big challenge there was never involved much as with transfer population. I knew that if I wanted to continue to grow in the field, that having another layer in the toolbox would ultimately improve my chances, but also another area to kind of for me to grow, not having worked with transfer students. So I love that challenge of it. Like, all right, well, what are we doing here, and how can I help? And, what is this world of transfers, right? But as time went on and I really kind of fell in love with this cohort of the transfer population, it's completely different from first year students. I use the analogy a lot of, a roller coaster ride. High school students are all in the queue line. They get up to the gates open, they enter the ride, they all start together. They all graduate high school and they go off on the ride and they enjoy it. Hopefully, right? Hopefully they enjoy their ride. And then they get to the final destination, which is their degree. Transfers, in part of this metaphor, is they're on the roller coaster, but they're somewhere on the roller coaster. They're not at the beginning stage. I got to figure out where they are on this roller coaster and talk them through the situation of, all right, here's where you are. Here's what we can do to help, express that time frame, and then hopefully get you to that degree. So I love that challenge, and they really know what they want. Transfer students, if you've talked to transfer students, anyone listening has talked to transfer students, they have 3 simple questions. How long is it going to take till I graduate? How many credits are going to transfer over? And what is going to be the cost? They know what they're looking for, and they've really kind of narrowed it down. So being able to talk to transfer students being able to understand what they want and really listen to the silence of a transfer student is invaluable. I think that's kind of where the key lies with a lot of transfer students. They'll explain what they want to accomplish in that time frame and then be quiet. And you have to Rubik's Cube that quietness to figure out the key to unlock what they want to really achieve.
What's the biggest misconception about transfer student recruitment?
They are some of the best students that I've worked with in my tenure. We had commencement, and one of the students came up to me before his commencement and just wanted to take pictures, and he handed me a card, and he was like, just read it when you get a moment. And I'm not even kidding. He left, and I sat at my desk and I just cried because what he wrote was so powerful, and like you don't get to really see that side. It was great. It was one of the best moments in my career. Knowing how much I helped these students, when they weren't being helped, that was awesome. It was an awesome experience. And if I could get one card for the 10 years that I've been in this industry, that's great. That's fine with me. I know that I'm trying to help out as many students as possible, but when one writes back saying that I really had an impact, that really means the world.
Well, and what I love, a lot about that, Brian, is you took the time, even if it was for a matter of, minutes, to just kind of self-reflect and enjoy that moment, right? As you're sitting there and reading that message from that student. And I don't think enough of that. I put that on social media last week. I think too many of us don't, especially in leadership roles, celebrate small wins as much as we need to. You mentioned earlier, Brian, just about, as you've moved up the ladder, you've had to obviously have conversations with senior leadership above you. How do you approach a conversation, especially if okay, this may be uncomfortable, this is going to be a tough conversation, but you know what? It's something I'm advocating for because I know it's going to help my population, whether it's the transfer population, undergrad population, grad online, it doesn't matter, right? Like, how do you, or what advice would you give somebody who wants to go have those type of conversations with their immediate supervisor or even somebody senior to that person, but they know it's going to kind of be an uncomfortable conversation? How do you approach that?
Yeah. Thinking about it and doing it are completely different things. And I think the more you kind of dwell about it, the more you kind of psych yourself out of doing it. And if you're in that situation, you're bringing these ideas to senior leadership, director, VP, whoever it may be, they should be in a position where they understand why you're bringing this to their attention, right? Hopefully, depending on what the conversation is. I mean, if you're leaving the institution, I guess it might be a little bit of a different conversation than if you're advocating for, a couple $1,000s for students or for whatever program you're doing or for a trip or something like that. I think going into the situation, whatever that situation may be, having your kind of thoughts together, maybe jot them down before you go into the meeting or before you schedule the conversation, and kind of get your ideas together and kind of walk it through, right? Like even, I workshop things with my wife a lot because she's not in the industry. So I can get a clear understanding of like, hey, is this even making sense? Like, does that kind of, how does that sound to you? And kind of workshop it through. And there's sometimes that I'll workshop something through with my wife and she'll be like, well, what about if this is, what if this happens? And I'm like, wow, that's a good idea. I never really thought of that. So you have the ability to then pivot when you're actually in that conversation because you've had, the training wheel, so to speak. But I do honestly believe that if you are having a conversation that is tough or delicate or challenging to bring up to your supervisor, whomever it is above you, they're in a position to understand that it's coming or that you're bringing it to them to not, one, undermine what they're talking about or challenge them, but something that you've noticed that maybe is not right, or maybe we should look into this a little bit more and how can we fix this for either A, the betterment of your students, or B, the betterment of your institution, or B or C, I'm getting mixed up on the letters here, C, the betterment of your office environment, right? The morale, how it's working and functioning, something you might see might not be seen by others. So they should hopefully be in a situation where they respect that you're bringing that to their attention. And I've been on both ends of the spectrum where ideas that I brought up were quickly dismissed, and I walked back to my desk going, did I say it incorrectly? And I got more in my head about how it was presented, and I was like, I guess maybe I didn't present it correctly, and almost felt a little belittled at times. But then I've been on the other side of it where the ideas was like, wow, that was a great idea. Like, we didn't think of that. Let's look into this a little bit more. Let's pause on what we were doing. Let's look into this. So I really honestly think that if you are in that situation, to workshop it a little bit, and then really have your thoughts ready to go. The worst thing you could do is go in there without any, kind of thought process, and then you're kind of just floundering, like, well, but if we, like, you kind of sound like you're backpedaling a little bit. So having at least some thought process, they will know and see that you prepared and workshopped this and thought of everything, and that should hold a little bit more water for you.
Any thoughts on how you get past when you do take? Because I think you're exactly right. You're going to take ideas in any position to senior leadership. Sometimes it's going to work and they're going to say, yep, let's do that. Talk to us about what you need from us, Brian. And sometimes they're going to be like, nope, right or wrong, you get shut down. How do you walk away, maybe not feeling defeated for too long? Because I think it's totally okay to feel defeated in the moment and try to say, okay, did I present it wrong, to your point, or did I not? Was I not prepared? How do you make sure, though, you don't stew in that and just let that really start to affect, for example, the rest of your day?
Yeah. So there's times like I'll present ideas to upper management and just like kind of plant the seed and be like, hey, what do we think about this idea? And, or why are we doing it like this? Or, what was the outcome of it that happened last year, or what have you? And kind of just plant that seed, knowing full well that in 2 weeks, I'm going to bring the conversation back up. So there's been those kind of situations where I know going in that I'm not going to get an answer. The conversation is going to end there. And I know full well leaving there that in 2 weeks, I'll mark it down. I'm going to come back and follow up with that conversation, water it a little bit here and there, and kind of go back. But then there's other times where I will bring a conversation up and leave with a solid answer of like, no, we're not doing that. Or no, this is how it's going, or the dreaded, like, we've always done it this way. So I think, like, as long as you continue to foster conversation and continue to have discussions and continue to bring ideas to the table, then it'll always be fruitful. I think if you kind of bring something up and you're shut down, or like the idea is not moved forward or what have you, you could stew in it and be like, yeah, that didn't work out, or I completely messed it up, and like put it to the side and not bring it back up. Then I think you're doing yourself a disservice for whatever that challenge is or whatever that topic is. But if you continue to like think about it and grow on it and look into it and bring it back up to leadership, I think that's the best thing you could do.
A couple other things I want to pick your brain on and just get your thoughts on. I've been having more conversations, I feel like, in the last 12 months, Brian, with leadership all the way down to brand new admissions counselors who are like, okay, I understand that working in higher ed, especially in the admission side, is going to feel like a sales job sometimes, right? I mean, you're selling the student experience at your institution. How do you mix that interplay of saying, okay, I know this is a process. I want to create a personal connection and develop a relationship and develop trust and rapport because I know it's important. But I also know I work, in this case, at the end of the day, for TCNJ. And I also have to figure out, is this student going to be a good fit? Can we continue to move them through? Just thoughts on how you make sure you're infusing both of those and not kind of leaning too far one way or too far the other way.
Yeah, you want me to give my secret sauce away here, huh? Like, you want to give my McDonald's
absolutely
answer?
Whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I really look at this job. Yes, many people say like, oh, it's a sales job. It's this, it's that. But I really make it my own, right? And luckily enough at TCNJ, I've been able to experiment and have fun with some of the marketing, and even I've shared some marketing conversations with you, and your input was greatly valued. I really like to put a little bit of myself into all of the communication, like have fun with it, right? This doesn't have to be so stressful for students. It really doesn't. It could be so simple, and I think we over stress and make this a lot harder than it has to be. And when we feel stressed and like crazy and burdened about it, then the student definitely feels like that, right? And I think it translates back to being a parent too. Like if you're trying to put your kid down for a nap or for bed and you're stressed out and you're worried about, they're going to stay up all day. So being able to understand that, and I think the more fun I have with students, the more they're like, oh, that guy is pretty cool. Like, why is he so cool? Like, let me continue to look at the school he works at. And that's kind of like my mentality of like, I could get up there and do 1,000 presentations, and eventually, if I'm not having fun with it, I'm going to lose my mind. I like to have my presentation. Like, they joke because I take so long in my presentation, but I'm having fun, and I'm here with an audience that wants to learn more about the school, and I'm going to give you all the information you need. I'm very transparent, and our school kind of advocates itself on being a transparent school. Like, if you want an answer, we're going to give you an answer. And you want to speak to a professor, or you want to speak to the chair, they're going to give you an answer. You want to speak to financial aid or so and so, they're going to give you an answer. So if I'm not starting that in the beginning, when a student reaches out and wants to know, hey, is this a school for me? And I want to do X, Y, and Z. If I'm not able to present a transparent answer, or even say, hey, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to reach out and find somebody that can, I think that helps. But I like to have fun with my job. You know, I do like to engage with students and make it not as professionally, I guess. Like, you don't always have to refer to me as Mr. Switay. Like, that's cool if you do, but you don't have to. Like, my emails with students are quick. One of the former transfer students here was like, I thought it was a text bot that was answering my emails because it was so fast. But once, a certain time of the day comes, I'm checked out, and I'm spending time with my family. So I try to incorporate that. Sometimes students need a fast answer, and if it's during the workday, yeah, you'll get an answer pretty quickly. So I really try to have fun with the job. I think that translates a lot into what students feel. I try to take the stress out. I tell every family that I work with, this, I'm going to try and make this the most stress-free experience of your entire process. And if I don't hit on that, then I failed you. So I really try to lay it out in the beginning. I'm transparent. Whatever you need to know, I'll try and find the answer for you, whether it's through me or somebody else. We're going to have fun doing this, non-stress. And, we'll see you here in the fall or spring rather. So it really, my personality is through the whole entire process for students. And I think even now that we have a transfer team here, they're starting to have a lot of fun with it as well too. And we're starting to see some of the, the numbers come through that show that. So we're happy about it.
And do you find, or have you found, I should say, that approach works equally effectively on both the undergrad and transfer side? Or to your point earlier, transfer students are a little farther along, a little bit more mature. They know what they want more than a lot of 17 and 18-year-olds. I don't have to, once I do those things, guide them as much after that. Once I have their attention and I've made this about them and they can see that. I mean, just any thoughts on, all right, you have to do it a little bit differently on the undergrad side because of this versus on the transfer side, it might be like this.
I mean, I think it'll work on both sides of the playing field here, as long as you're authentic. Once you start trying to be something that you're not, I think you're in trouble. And I think the high school students especially can see through that really, really quickly.
What do you mean by authentic, Brian? Give us an example.
So I'm not going to be different going into a high school visit than I would at a college visit. You're going to get the same thing, whether you email me as a first year student, as a college transfer student, or as even a parent or guardian. I'm going to be the same type of person. So you always know that you're going to be dealing with me in my true authentic self. I'm not putting on a show for anybody. I'm not trying to, like, hey, come look at our school. Like, we're this, this, and this. And then they'll just like leave you hanging. You're going to get the same exact representation of me, whether it's on this podcast, whether it's in person, whether it's at an information session, college fair, or if you meet me in ShopRite. Like, that's who I am. I'm very transparent. I'm fun. Like, I'm lively, but I'm also a very introverted person at times, which is like the weirdest thing to say. Because I like to be in my music and be by myself. But when I'm speaking with you, it's not like I'm putting it on, right? I'm not turning on the entertainment switch. That's who I am. That's, I could be in the limelight or let you shine. Like, it doesn't matter to me. And that's how I feel. I joke around with school counselors that, like, I just don't want to be a meme. Like, I don't want to go to a school and like students make fun of you for being over the top and like jumping the shark like you would in like a TV show. But I try to make sure that I'm staying true to like trends that are happening. Like, I'm not trying to And I think for one of your newsletters as a guest writer for you, kind of wrote about this. Like, I don't like watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians, but the kids, students do, right? Like, and being able to connect with them on their level, helps. Like, I, I have TikTok. I don't know how to post a TikTok, but I'll watch TikToks. I'll see the trends. And then I could interact with students, and when they're like, "Oh, did you see that trend? Yeah, I saw that trend." Like, that's pretty funny. Like, or being able, when they're not expecting it, to say like, "Oh, well, what about this?" And they're like, "You know about that?" Or like, so being able to relate to students, I think, helps. And like I said, it's funny because I don't have Instagram. I might be the last person on the face of the earth that doesn't have Instagram. Like, my dog has an Instagram, I don't, but I have TikTok. So my wife is just like, "Where are we in this landscape of social media?" And even to that point, like, I've taken a step back on my social media, to be honest with you. Like, I'll engage in LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook here and there, but for the most part, I'm not posting as much as I used to in my mid 20s. I feel like I'm gaining more valuable information from social media than I am putting out there. But it really is just kind of being authentic, and being who I am, and what you see is what you get. And that's going to be who I am in the office, working day to day, working with students. But to go back to the question of, I just want to be personable to students, that they can feel comfortable coming to me with questions, and even parents and guardians for that matter too. Like, I just want to make this process super simple and super easy, where they're not stressing about things.
And do you find that authenticity and what I would call is humanizing this process, right? And
Mm-hmm.
just trying to be authentic and helpful in a lot of cases makes it easier than when you do have to, for example, nudge that student because you've encouraged them to apply or visit or whatever it is a handful of times and they haven't taken that next step. Do you find it's easier to do that once you've started the way you've explained there? Or do you find, well, there are still challenges and here's how I might handle that, knowing that, again, it's still my job to try to help them figure out if they're going to take that next step?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely helps continue to leave the door open, and building that relationship with students. So, quick example, before jumping on this podcast, there was a student who I've been working with since, was it June now? Since February, and great student. Met, and he was super excited when he finally got his acceptance letter, and then kind of just disappeared for a little bit. Haven't heard from him. Couldn't get in contact with him. And it wasn't like I was following up to be like, "Yo, why haven't you deposited or anything?" It was like just checking in, like, "Hey, how's everything going? Like, I know when we chatted, you were worried about X, Y, and Z. I just want to follow up and see how everything's going." And I haven't heard from him. And most recently, I just followed up with him, and I was like, "Hey, I just want to reach out. Hope everything's well. If you need me, I'm here. As promised, I'm here to help you." And that was it. That's all I needed to do. And he responded in minutes and was like, "Hey, a lot of things going on, kind of trying to figure out, what my next steps are, and, cost of tuition and all this stuff." And I was like, "Call me. I'm here to help. Like, if you want, like, I'm no pressure. I'm not trying to like force you into anything. If you want to call me, I'm here. Here's my hours." He called me, and we chatted for like 20 minutes. And it really just boiled down to that he was afraid to tell me that the enrollment deposit was too much for his family. And that's all it really was. And I was like, "Man, I told you in the beginning, like, don't hesitate. I'm here to help you," right? Like, and I tell all my students as well, if it's at TC&J, great. If it's not, I just want to make sure that you're successful where you're going, um, and what that next stop is. Because at the end of the day, we're all counselors. I say this on multiple panels. So if anyone listening has been on a panel with me, you've heard it. We're all counselors. We're here to counsel you, admissions counselors, school counselors, etc. We want to make sure that you're going to the best possible situation for you, whether it be emotionally, financially, academically, physically, whatever it is. We want to make sure that you're set up for success. So he was just super embarrassed that he couldn't come to me and explain, like, "Hey, I don't have that enrollment deposit." So we worked out, and looked into some things, and he actually didn't need to submit the full enrollment deposit. He had a couple things that fit different criteria. So, it ended up working out for him, and I can't wait to see what he does in the fall. But at the same point, I think just building that relationship, that I was able to just reach out and be like, "Hey, man, what's going on? If you need me, call me. I'm here for you." Um, and just getting off that 20-minute phone call or so with him, like, "Dude, you don't understand how much this means." Like,
Well, I think the key you hit on there, Brian, because I've seen a lot of similar type stories over the years, right, is setting the tone early, like you talked about, and saying, "This is who I am. This is what I want to help you with. I'm going to be here. You don't have to go through this process alone.
Yeah.
But then also reminding them, like, I also can't read your mind. And so, I want to understand how you're feeling about this. And so I'm going to ask you some direct questions so it doesn't feel like I'm just kind of like checking in, which I'm not against checking in. I just tell people you have to check in intentionally,
Yeah.
right? You can call it checking in if that's what you want to call it. I'll call it working with a student intentionally. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
What are you trying to figure out? Well, in that case, you're trying to figure out, boy, he was really excited and now he's kind of fallen off the map. The last two things I do with every guest, Brian, first of the two things is a signature question I ask. What or who has been a very influential resource for you throughout your career?
Well, I feel like the easy answer would be you, right? Like me and you, and in like kind of an answer. Me and you have chatted more and more, since we met in, what was it, San Diego, right? In person in San Diego. And, I appreciate you letting me, write a little bit in your newsletter there in the beginning. But just even, I know I could pick up the phone and call you or text you and be like, hey, I need to talk to you about this. But I also think, like, in the career, um, I don't know if he's listening, but I looking back in my career, my first director at Stevens Institute was Shane Topping, and we had the same train together and commuted in and out along the Jersey Shore there. And at one point, he really took me under his wing and was showing me the ins and outs of the business. And I wish my mid-30 Brian was more attentive to the mid-20 Brian and paid more attention to him, because he gave me a lot of great information, really tried to show me what this industry was about. So Shane, if you're listening, thank you so incredibly much. But I really also think that there was one person on travel who, unfortunately, he's no longer with us. Joe Walsh was a admissions counselor who recruited Florida and a variety of other areas from Suffolk University. And older gentleman, loved this guy. We had so much fun, and he taught me and explained things to me that you would never think of. And just being around him made me happier. Like, seeing his Facebook posts really, like, brought a smile to my face. Chatting with him, and like I said, he's no longer around, so I miss him deeply. And I'm sure a lot of people who know him, if you're listening, have the same admiration for him as well. He taught me a lot about college admissions, and just his years of insight and how he carried himself and connecting with students was unbelievable. And a lot of who I am today still kind of thanks to what he taught me. So I miss Joe very much.
I appreciate you sharing all that. And obviously, the gratitude you shared for our conversation means a ton to me. I've told you that, but
Yeah.
I will tell you again, I appreciate that I've been able to be a resource for you. Last thing we're going to do is what I call fun rapid fire. I'm just going to give you a handful of quick things, and I just want your instant answers. You ready?
Ready.
You have to give up one tomorrow, the Yankees or the Knicks.
Knicks.
Favorite movie?
Oh, I'm going to get heat for this. Wizard of Oz.
Love it. Biggie or Jay-Z?
You're going to kill me, Jeremy. Oh, man, I'm going to get so much heat. Biggie.
Who's the most competitive person you know?
My wife.
And if you were a radio DJ, what would your name be? And before you answer that, fun fact, Brian was an intern for a radio station in Pennsylvania back in the day.
Yeah, I was. And I had my own radio show in college. So I was DJ Swit. We had on Saturday nights, me and my best friend to this day, DJ Swit and JB, the pregame show on Saturday nights. And we did really awesome things. Hip hop, kind of got people ready for the weekend. We interviewed a lot of great people, met with a lot of cool celebrities. So yeah, I have a lot of cool things that I've done in my past.
Well, I learned something new about you there, my friend, because I did not know you were a radio DJ in college. And so, fun fact, as we sign off today, I did the exact same thing when I was in college as well. I DJ'd for my university radio station. So now everybody knows those two fun facts. Brian, I just appreciate you being on and sharing so much today with us and being able to open up about some things that I know a lot of people are dealing with. If people want to connect with you offline, what's the best way to do that?
I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. At Brian at TCNJ is my Twitter handle. Brian Switay is my LinkedIn. Like I said, I'm not on Instagram. But yeah, email me. I'm sure I'm accessible. You can find me. I'm not hiding, just not on LinkedIn or not on Instagram, excuse me.
Brian, thanks for being with us today.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for reaching out. Appreciate you having me.
Hey, all, Zach here from Enrollify. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mission Admissions with Jeremy Tiers. If you like this episode, do us a huge favor and hit that follow and subscribe button below. Furthermore, if you've got just 2 minutes to spare, we would greatly appreciate you leaving a rating and a review of this show on Apple Podcasts. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. But Enrollify is far more than just a podcast network. Enrollify is where higher ed comes to learn new marketing skills, discover new products and services, and find their next job. We're a growing, learning community of 4,000 members, and we'd love to welcome you into the fold. You can access our free blog articles, newsletters, e-courses, and more, or purchase our master course on how to market a university with Terry Flannery at enrollify.org. We look forward to meeting you soon and welcoming you into the community. Again, you can subscribe for free at enrollify.org.